Hello and welcome. This is the third part of the strategy to match the HR challenge. We've identified already that finding talent, your recruitment strategy, is the foundation stone, it's the key to everything, followed on by an engagement strategy, and now we want to look at an L&D, a learning and development strategy, and then we look at performance management. So what I'm going to do in this video, it's a short video, I'm going to walk through the workbook and show you a development plan website where you can build your development plan, and basically just argue the case for an approach that you should take to L&D. So let's jump right in and look at the guide. So here we have the workbook, same format as the previous workbooks. So HR challenge, part 3, developing talent, your L&D strategy. And as you can see here, it is a fairly short section, and there are 3 core parts to it: the individual development plan, team development, and organizational training plan. And what I want to do in this video is build the case for the development plan, the individual development plans being the foundation, and then how that links into an organizational development plan through the team. Now clearly in L&D we have 2 main objectives. The first main objective is to make sure that the individual can perform in their role in a superior fashion. So we want to train and develop, we want to identify the gaps between the individual and the role, be it hard skills, be it soft skills, be it whatever. Identify the gaps and put in place the wherewithal to support the individual so they become a superior performer, i.e. they become a better match for the role. The second is we want to achieve the organisational objectives. So we want to make sure the individuals, the team and the organisation have the competences, the wherewithal to actually achieve their objectives, both in the hard and soft skills and also in the will to win. Remember we talked about that. So they have the desire and the competence. So these are the 2 things we're trying to accomplish. And I've argued to you that it starts with the individual development plan and we build from there. So let's walk through it and see what is the argument that I'm making here. The first section, of course, is the exact same as the other workbooks. It talks about the HR challenge and the winning strategy, the 4 elements that we're proposing: a recruitment strategy, an engagement strategy, an L&D strategy, and a performance management strategy. And we're arguing the case that although these are like coat hangers on the rail in the shop that we said that you can hang different clothes on and do different things, fundamentally it is a system, and I would argue strongly that the foundation stone is the recruitment strategy. If you get the recruitment strategy right, if you make the investment there up front, the engagement, L&D and so on becomes very, very simple, because you're matching people to role, you're onboarding them properly, they're the right people for that role, for that team, for this organisation at this particular point in time. That you're putting in place the onboarding, you're putting in place the development plan and things at that particular point. You're starting that process of what we'll talk about now. And so the engagement is built, and then the L&D is really a question, and even linking into performance management, because performance management look at the L&D all the time. The L&D is really a question of just fine-tuning, tweaking and supporting. It's not a big major intervention, or shouldn't be a big major intervention. So let's jump down and look at the L&D proper. As I said, it starts with the development plan. So it starts with the individual development plan, then the team and then the organisation. So bridging the gaps, make sure the person has the skills required and the wherewithal to actually successfully complete their role. Now the foundation of this is the ideal candidate form. We've identified what the job requires for superior performance. We've identified what the individual has. We've measured the 2 of them. We come in a format where they can actually be compared, and then we compare the 2 of them. We come up with a gap report, and we take that gap report and say, here are the gaps that we need to bridge, and we put a development plan in place to do that. And that's what I'm going to look at now. I'm going to show you that in just one moment. Actually, a practical example. I'm actually going to do one with you so you can see it. The development plan, the idea of the development plan is that, and we talked about this in engagement, both recruitment section and engagement. The idea of the development plan is that the individual actually has a plan, a step-by-step guide of what they need to do to be successful in this role. And maybe a little of it, or maybe a lot of it, depending on how well the individual is matched to the role. And certainly if you're starting with existing people in the existing roles, there'll probably be significant gaps. When you're hiring for a role, you've the opportunity to screen out the people who don't match the role well, so typically the gaps will be less. But if you're starting with an existing team of people, the gaps might be significant. So the development plan, I'm going to take you to this website now. You see here in the document, I have a link there, say ttidevelopment.com, and this is a model that you can go and you can use. It's available to everybody. And if you have a gap report, or even if you've never done any of this, if you just simply identify what you think the gaps are for an individual, you can do it around behaviours, driving forces and competencies on our website here. But the same model applies. I want you to imagine expanding this model so it's not just for our sciences and the gaps in the soft skills, but also expanding the same model for hard skills in other areas. So let's go and look at this development website. So here we are on the website, ttidevelopment.com, and for the purpose of this exercise, I want you to imagine that we actually have used a report called assessment called Trimetrics DNA. So we've measured the behaviours of the role, and the driving forces, and we've measured the competencies. So what behaviours are required for the role, what driving forces are required for the role, and what competencies are required for the role. And then you have measured the role in that way, you've measured the individual that way, you've compared the two of them, you've got the gap report for the individual, and identifies a number of things that are missing. So let's just do this, and I'm just going to make this up, just none of this matters. So you enter the name, in the person's name, the company, and their role. So let's just look in here, and let's just say the companies that we identified. I think we said that futuristic thinking, if I remember, was a gap that we had in the comparison report when we did the gap report. You remember between John Smith, I think it was, the sample report, futuristic thinking. So I'm going to make that as being the only competency that we need to develop and continue. And in driving forces, if I recall correctly, they were weak in a couple of areas. So I'm going to put down here resourceful, that they were weak in, and I'm going to put down they were commanding, I think, intellectual, put down resourceful, intellectual. And then in behavioural traits, we're going to say that they were actually a very good match. They were behavioural traits, but I think the one I'm going to add in here is people orientation, just to keep this sort of interesting to do them. And so now I've just selected one competency, one skill, futuristic thinking, two driving forces, resourceful and intellectual. So resourceful is about return on investment, return on my time, energy, money. I'm always looking for, in terms of utility and the application resources, I'm always looking for a return. And intellectual is I'm looking for truth and knowledge, depth and breadth of knowledge. I like learning for learning's sake. So these are the two rewards I'm looking for from the role, and we're saying that the role requires those, and maybe I'm not as strong in those. And then behavioural traits, people orientation. I'm just saying the role requires that, just keep this simple. And then we come up with a plan. And you can see here, the plan is sort of interesting. Here you have personal development plan, Trimetrics DNA, so behaviours, 3 metrics, 3 meters, behaviours, driving force and competencies for Porrick Berry and my name and thing. And talks about here the little blurb explaining what it is. And all development plans require goals, time frames, action steps, methods, and evaluation. So keep these in mind as you work through the activity. And identifies the competency, futuristic thinking, the driving forces, resourceful, intellectual, and behaviours, people orientation. And then here is what it does. It gives you the futuristic thinking, and it describes it, imagining, envisaging, projecting, and or creating what has not yet been actualized. And then demonstrates an ability to connect the dots. Looks beyond the forces driving the current reality that may have long-term effects, utilizes foresight and intuitive perception, and so on. So it sort of breaks up that definition, gives you practical examples of what you'd be looking at. And it says, based on your competency rating compared to the requirements of a job, check the word below that best indicates the amount of effort you will have to put forth. So to master it, significant or moderate. And then here are things you can do. To further develop your abilities in this area, choose some of the following suggestions to implement. As a whole, listen, collect, analyse and organise pertinent information in a way that leads to understanding. Seek the opinion of others to draw from their insight. Observe and analyse the forces driving current reality and made of. So it gives you a list of things you can do. Develop an active interest in the future, envision possibilities others may not. And what you're trying to do here is you're trying to prompt the person to say, what are the practical things that you can do? Evaluation, measurement, how am I going to feel when I've improved this ability and mastered it? What impact will it have on my career, professional life? What will I hear others say about me after I've mastered it? And then you go down here and you've got a blank sheet. Futuristic thinking, development activities, the start date, the end date, the signature of the person who's actually going to do this, and the activity partner, typically the supervisor or an L&D person. And then it goes into resourceful and talks about what that means, and again, evaluation measurables, and what will you do. And then intellectual, the same, and what will you do. People orientation, and what will you do. And then it gives examples of formal training, quizzes, reading, role playing, and things that you can actually do to grow in this area. Now I show you this as a model, not saying that everything is in this, clearly it's not. There are lots of other things that you will want to include in this. But what I want you to see here is the idea of the individual having their own personal professional development plan, covering areas like the soft skills, the behaviours, the driving forces and so on, but also covering the hard skills and other things. And they actually have a development plan. It defines what each area of development is and why, so they can see the gap reports, they can see what the job requires, they can see where they need to upskill themselves. It's in a plan, they have their own plan, and their start and end dates, there's somebody supervising, activity partner signing off with them, and so it becomes part then of the performance management system, and we look at that later, where they're actually growing. Because remember what performance management is, right? Performance management is helping people improve their performance, and this is a key part of helping them improve their performance, and we look at that again in the performance management section. So that's the individual development plan, or the concept of the individual development plan. I now want to go and look at the team development as the next logical step. There are two parts of team development. The part of each person's plan that are specific to that individual and to that role. And then there's an amalgam of these individuals. I want you to imagine a team of, let's say, 10 people, just for simplicity. So each individual has their own individual development plan. That's about bridging the gaps between them and their role. But then the team itself will have a development plan for the team. It will be an amalgam of the individual development plans. So I want you to imagine taking all the development plans of 10 individuals and seeing what do they have in common, and there'll be specific areas that you can train the team in common, because they're all covering that area. And then there'll be specific team related development that has nothing to do with the individuals per se. So it could be around a particular skill, a hard skill, let's say a sales skill, or it could be around communications, dynamic communications. Let's say they were a distributed team, that they were working remotely. It might be workshops around communicating when you're working remotely, or whatever. So specific types of training. You see I've written there, these commonalities become team and organizational training programs. In addition, we spoke earlier of leadership development, EQ development, conversations, communications, etc. as general ongoing requirements. So it's easy to imagine this team of 10 people, everybody having their individual plan, and then in addition to that, having specific workshops and things that you can do that the team require to become a more effective team. So imagine Patrick Lecuoni's 5 dysfunctions of a team. Imagine, for example, a training program around that, helping them build trust at the foundation and working their way up to goal achievement of the team. Those kind of programs, which aren't specific to the individual, but they're specific to the team and team requirements. The next one I want to look at is organizational training. And really and truly, the organizational training is just an amalgam again of the specific team developments, so the individual development plans, an amalgam of all of those, and the team development plan, an amalgam of all of those. But there are important things I think to keep in mind in terms of the organisational development, or organisational training and development, or L&D. The purpose of it is ultimately to align it with the goals of the organisation. So what is the organisation trying to accomplish? Because, for example, there may be future things that the organisation wants to do, or directions the organisation wants to go in, and you need to start developing people now. It's not actually written down anywhere. It's not a requirement of a role today, or a requirement of a team today, but it may be a requirement in the future. So I'm going to give you the simplest example is, imagine AI. Just a simple example, a lot of people are working in a creative space, and you identified a year ago that AI is the future, and you start developing people around the whole area of AI, so that when it came along, the team were ready to embrace it. Or I want you to imagine that, imagine pre-COVID. Imagine that we're all working in the office and everybody starts working at home. There may be a training requirement for the organisation in general around working from home and remote working. And you may identify this is the way you're going to work going forward, that you're not going to go back to the office. And you may identify that there are training and development requirements required in that regard. And so on and so forth. There are new products that are being launched or whatever. So think about this thing of alignment when you think about the organisational development and L&D for the organisation. Clearly it's made up of the individual development requirements, the team development requirements, but there are also organisational development requirements that may be quite independent of those two. So a couple of things I think that are important here. Incorporating elements listed below in the organisational training plan, you can ensure the employees receive relevant, effective and well executed training. Okay, now identify the target audience for each training program based on the job roles or specific skill requirements. We've discussed that, we understand what that is. Ensure the training plan aligns with the overall strategic goals and objective of the organisation, because you may, in fact, even at the individual level or the team level, there may be constraints. It is unusual that we've all the resources, be it money or be it time, i.e. people to deliver, that we've all the resources that we would like to have to achieve all the L&D things that we would like to achieve. So typically we have to select. And I'm saying here that ensuring that the training plans align with the overall strategic goals and objectives of the organisation is probably the way you're going to prioritise them. You're probably going to say, these are the ones that are required as a priority for the organisation. Develop and select training content that addresses the identified individual and organisational needs. Ensure the content is relevant, up to date and engaging for the participants. And I can't overemphasise that. People just don't want to go on training. But we've a great expression that we talk about when we talk about interacting with people. People don't remember what you did for them, they remember how you made them feel. And I think the same is sort of true of training. People don't necessarily remember how wonderful the training was in terms of the content. They remember how wonderful the training was in terms of the experience that they actually had. So keep in mind this notion of that the training requires to be really engaging, and using different media and so on is important. Establish a training schedule that accommodates the needs of employees and the operational requirements of the organisation is an obvious one, and make sure it's communicated clearly. I really like the idea of a training matrix, that we have it up online, a whole training matrix, so each individual plan is up there and it's consolidated into team plans that are consolidated into an organisational plan. So we see, for example, that there are 40 people at different levels around the organisation require a communications workshop. So they're all in this communication work and they all do it together and so on. So you can consolidate these various things into a training matrix. And I want you to imagine all the possibilities across the top and all the people down the left hand side. Just again, it's just a simple example. But imagine all the people down here, all the possibilities up here, and you highlight the various boxes, and then you take those boxes out and say, okay, there's 15 people require this, and 10 people require that, and 4 people require that, and 100 people require this. And you break those out into programs and you run those programs over the period. I know this is the way most people do it, but again, just to get this idea of the matrix into your head. And determine the most effective delivery methods. I mentioned this in terms of engagement. Home learning, workshops, seminars, online courses on the job. It doesn't have to be training. It doesn't have to be the old-fashioned we show up in a room. I mean, for example, I do a huge amount of L&D on my own on programs online. I'm on YouTube, I'm watching people, I'm training myself, I'm learning all sorts of new stuff all the time, and it's self-directed training. And I'm using multimedia, lots of different places I go to looking for the information. So think about this. It doesn't have to be the old-fashioned way. It can be built into people's individual plans, and they go away and they do it on their own time and in their own way. And as I often say, it's a place and a pace that suits them. Explore integrated relevant technologies. Again, I really believe in this. The more you can use technologies, some people learn different ways. We know there's lots of different learning styles. Allow people to incorporate technologies that play to their styles and help them. So e-learning platforms, virtual classrooms, LMSs, and so on. Allocate less resource, of course, and again, this is a budgeting issue, materials, facilities, trainers, and so on and so forth. Do you have them? And use that to help you prioritize where you're going to go. And develop the budget, considering the costs associated. Incorporate assessment and evaluation mechanisms to measure the effectiveness of the training. This is really important, and a lot of people sort of skip this because they don't know how to do it. And the question is, how do you measure the efficacy of a particular intervention? At an individual level, it's obvious. So the person is doing something and we see their performance improve in a very specific area. So it's relatively easy with an individual. They learn the hard skill, or they improve their communication style, or they modify their behaviours, or whatever it is. They become better leaders, they become more active in areas of EQ, and we can observe and get feedback. So getting that measure is not so difficult on an individual. But once you start moving to a team or organisation level, how can you measure the effectiveness? And I encourage you to consider things like tools. We have tools, for example, one called the stress quotient. It was a really, really interesting tool. We use it before and after interventions. And the stress quotient measures things like, am I getting feedback? Am I getting support? Is my boss working closely with me and helping me? And so on and so forth. So there's lots of things in there. And if somebody gets trained and developed, and they go through a process, typically these kind of things improve. So am I being supported? Am I being trained? Is my career progressing? And so on and so forth. We can measure before and afterwards for teams and for organizations, and you want to see those scores going down. So there are tools that you can use that are very effective in measuring before and after, and I do encourage you to do it, because if you're in L&D, in H&R or L&D, you have to make a case for the budget. You have to be able to show bottom line performance to the senior management of the organization to get the support that's required for you to continue doing the things that you know you need to do. So metrics of success are critical. Establish feedback loops to continue to improve it. Again, this goes without saying, you're always looking for evaluation. How was that for you? Was that good or the bad? What should I start doing? What should I stop doing? What should I continue doing? You're always asking these questions in the training. Implement systems to monitor progress of employees through their training, throughout their training program. Now we have that for the individual, we need to think about how you would do it for teams and sort of organisation wide. There are legal and compliance requirements. Again, think about those in particular industries. There are things where they have to be validated, that they've actually completed certain trainings, that they've completed certain exams in the IT industry, the farm industry, and so on. So make sure you're on top of those. Develop communication strategies to inform employees about training programs, their benefits, and so on and so on. It's really important for people to take ownership of their own development, and your communication strategy is integral to that. That people come to understand this is about them, upskilling themselves, becoming better at what they do, creating new opportunities, creating choices for themselves within the company or outside of the company. Consider recognition or rewards. I'm a great believer in this, but they have to be real. So rewards to people who have successfully completed training, i.e. they passed an exam, they've successfully completed something, a result has changed, or some outcome that is different. So make sure that if you are rewarding, they're genuine awards and rewards for genuine progress. Otherwise it becomes just another everybody's a winner. And these do encourage participation, and do encourage engagement when people get these. Integrate the training plan into the broader framework for long-term development and career progression. So the whole idea of succession planning. Again, I just want to talk about that really, really quickly. When we look at the individual team and organisation development plans, they're all in place. But then at the individual level and at the organisation level, so if you look at the growth of the organisation, the objectives and goals, objectives and strategies and where you want to take the organisation, you need to build a matrix of what are we going to require in terms of people, what will the positions be, what skills, what competencies, what knowledge will be required for success going forward, and start thinking about the various roles that currently exist, how they will need to be upskilled, how they will need to grow and develop. Think about future new roles that maybe don't even exist at all today, and then think about who do I have in the organisation and how do I build my succession plans, or how do I put development plans in place for individuals so they're ready for the next roles or for new roles that don't exist yet. So you're always thinking about building bench strength and building a succession plan so you have an endless stream of talent coming up through the organisation to fill the current roles, their own roles right now, future roles for them, and future roles that don't even exist as yet that you've envisaged. So that's sort of it for the L&D strategy. I hope that's clear for you. And now I'm going to move on and look at performance management.